started. Those of you who may have come in late might not know who I am, but I taught for a number of years at the School of Social Work at the University of Montana, and currently I'm an independent contractor doing primarily a lot of research and training here in Missoula. So I've started my own business and kind of moved on from the university, but you know, my work really does include, even the kind of research that I do really includes a lot of training and facilitating, and maybe I'll use some examples today that describe that a little bit more for you. But welcome everyone to this grand occasion to start to look at how to do some change in your neighborhoods and how to actually develop some of the skills and learn some of the techniques for doing community organizing. So I'm really happy to be here today to help with that process, and likewise, as Ginny said, you know, as we move along today, feel free to pipe in, ask some questions. Although I have to say we have a fairly crammed agenda, as usual. I'm always having way more planned than I can ever get to do, but and then we're also like 15, almost 20 minutes late into our agenda. So, but we don't want to lose out on the kinds of dialogue that really, I think, enriches your work across neighborhoods. So let's make sure that you feel free to do that, but I may have to cut you off and say, well, but we've got to move on too. So to start with, I wanted to make sure that everybody had a good idea of what our purpose is here today, what we would like to achieve. And primarily, we would like to present to you a framework for how you can go about identifying and thinking about and making some changes in your neighborhood. And we're going to present actually a framework for that and show you some of the skills along that framework that you can use and apply in your neighborhoods. And the second thing here is to develop your skills. And as we go through, you've got your toolkit there. You're going to see that that is just jam-packed with so much information on strategies and tools that you can actually use. And then the last thing here is to begin to understand, and we're even going to start with more of our own personal awareness about ourselves as the primary tool for organizing in our communities. It's all about developing our own awareness and then being able to work with the neighborhood to develop their awareness about the neighborhood and what needs to change. So a primary emphasis of today, and where we're even going to start, is to start thinking about ourselves as the primary tool to help make that change happen. That makes sense so far to everybody, I hope? And I also wanted to say that we're not going to take any breaks between now and our 12:30 lunch break. 12:35 I think we have set up for lunch. So feel free to get up, get coffee, go use the facilities as you need to. And the same will be true this afternoon. We'll have another session from like 1:05 to 3 o'clock, again with no breaks, but you can just feel free to get up and move around and take care of yourselves as you need to. Okay, so that's this first piece. And then the second, these are the learning goals. And there's probably a zillion more, but these are the primary learning goals for today. And we would like you to develop an understanding of how the neighborhood change process works. There actually are a number of frameworks that people have developed over the years, and they've researched these frameworks to come up with some actual processes that don't necessarily work in linear fashion, but processes that you can actually identify that help you know where you're at and where maybe you need to be at, or where you need to start, or where you need to go back to. So that's a primary learning goal, and we'll show what's coming up next actually is the framework. And then another learning goal is to learn about, and we're actually going to practice some of the basic skills necessary for successful neighborhood organizing. And finally, again, this is to develop your own awareness about your role and your skills in applying some of this. And I have to say that, I've been at this for a while. I'm not going to say how long, but I've been at it for a while. And there isn't a time that I'm doing a project or involved in a community effort, or maybe even a day or 5 minutes that go by where I don't feel that I've learned something new and that I'm continuing to develop my skills. In other words, it's a journey to me that's never complete, and it's one where I always have to keep honoring the fact that I don't know everything I need to know, but I'm still going to be willing to throw my hat into the ring and take some risks and get out there and learn more and be open to learning more. So even though we put this down as a skill here for today or a learning goal, it's an ongoing process of learning more and more about yourself, and being open to learn about yourself through other people's eyes, I'd say, is one of the more important things. So on that note, you've got a copy of this in your toolkit that Lynette and Christine put together, and I think that toolkit is just phenomenal. I mean, it's going to be a great asset for you and for others in the community, in your neighborhoods who didn't get to come here today. But we put this together based on a number of different models I've used before, models I've actually developed, and kind of combined some things that would fit for neighborhood work. And so as this says, it's a neighborhood change cycle, but in essence, it's really a process that, as I said before, doesn't always start in one place and go in linear fashion around the circle. Sometimes what you find yourself having to do is to back up. It's like you've heard that expression before, you go one step forward and then sometimes you have to go 3 steps back. Well, that's the way this process works too. And so the first, if we can call it the first, because this is, I think, happening constantly, or it should be, is that you're always working on developing your own sense of how you fit in this process of organizing other people and promoting community and neighborhood change. And then the next step is, and this is a step I think for those you're going to be working with as well as yourself, is getting to know your neighborhood. And today, we're going to be actually focusing first on some exercises and some things that have to do with developing your personal awareness. Then we're going to move to this section, which is some ideas for how you can personally get to know your neighborhood in a different way, perhaps, than you know it now, and ways you can use to help other people get to know your neighborhood. And so that'll be the second thing we're going to do today. And actually, we'll do that this morning. And then the next piece is, how then do you start to begin neighborhood awareness about the issues that people are identifying, that are issues of concern in your neighborhood? And from there, how do you get people to actually join on in the effort, and how do you build their capacity to act? So these really are the primary phases or steps, if you will, that we're going to be addressing in this workshop today. And then in conversation with Lynette, she's going to talk later on at the end about plans for the future with additional training. And I think the thinking here, correct me if I'm wrong, Lynette, is that hopefully the steps that we're going to address here are going to help you prepare for getting some neighborhood participation going by this fall. So we're addressing those issues first, and then in subsequent workshops there will be more on planning, organizing, implementing, monitoring, and reflecting and evaluating, and seeing, learning about whether or not what you did was really helpful and what things may not have been helpful, which I think is essential in any kind of community work and neighborhood work. And then another piece, and I hope you don't see it, that it's just out here all by itself and last, and I think it's majorly important, and I think it's one we forget, and that is, how do you celebrate your efforts? And that's why I'm saying that this piece ought to be everywhere along the way. Does that make sense? So you're always trying to think of ways to take the time to sit back, to reflect, and to celebrate the work that you've done, and you can even celebrate things that didn't even go so well. So it's just that act of stepping back, honoring yourselves, honoring the works of other people, and saying, you know, this is what we're going to do to inspire and to nurture ourselves for the hard work that we've done. Okay, on that note, so this is, again, these are the steps that we're going to look at here today, the first 4. And you've got a copy of this in your folder so you can refer back to it. And then, and Lynette, feel free to just jump in anytime here if you can think of something that you want to. Huh? Yeah. And now we have Lynette. I think the only other thing I asked, and I think I don't have anything. I covered it all.
All right, cool.
Okay, great.
One of the things that was on the middle of that chart that you saw was community need was in the middle of that circle. And I think the biggest thing as neighborhood organizers and anybody who's trying to lead different efforts in the neighborhood is those efforts that you're trying to change or support or promote should really be efforts that the neighborhood wants to see. So everything that you're doing should be based on that community need. Whatever that neighborhood need is what you should be basing it on. That's when you get more ownership from people. That's when you get more participation from people. And so as change agents is what we call neighborhood organizers. So all of you are change agents. You're wanting to make sure that that change is reflected in what people want. And a lot of times we get involved because we have our own ideas of what needs to happen, and that's good. But before really going forward with that, sometimes you need to make sure that that's what other people want too. Otherwise, it's a constant battle between doing what you want to do and what other people want to do, and it might not always be effective. And a lot of times you'll find out that what your ideas are, other people's ideas are the same in your neighborhood. And so when you can get everybody on board, you have more power as a group who believes in the same cause instead of yourself going out there trying to do it alone. So that's where the community need in the middle comes in. What I want to talk about, or I can't remember how long I have.
Till
11:25, so I could do that in 25 minutes. Okay. Is the things to know about yourself. One of the big things about being an organizer that I've noticed over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been doing this work, I'll say how many years, it's been a little bit of time so far, is constantly knowing how my actions, reactions, responses, interactions, relationships, all of those things that I have with people affects the work that I do. It is probably this position is one of the positions in life where everything that you do and say and act, and even if you're having a bad day, can promote, inhibit, change the course of the work that you do. And so knowing yourself and having some personal awareness about when I'm frustrated, you know, I tend to bite and just, I look scowl. And that's not a good thing, you know, if I'm working with people, I've really got to figure out a different way to express that emotion. Also for me, another thing that I do is I tend to want to interrupt people if I really feel like they're going off in the wrong direction, but it's not about me. When you're doing organizing work, it's not about you when you're a leader, and I tend to want to jump in all the time, and it's a constant thing that I have to recognize that I'm going to do that and not do it. Because it's not going to be the most positive thing for that group. It's about the group, and the group will get there, and I have to believe in them that they'll get there, because they will. But my job is to be supportive, offer suggestions, help guide them. As you guys have noticed, I've been doing this with neighborhood councils, and I don't jump in and say, you guys shouldn't try that. I say, okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Or if you say, there's no way we can do monthly meetings, okay, can we do quarterly? Can we try something different? It doesn't matter what that looks like. To me, I'm just asking you to start to have more input from your neighborhood, and that might help. So those are the kind of things personal awareness is about. It's directly related, knowing yourself is directly related to your ability to promote agreement between people in your neighborhood, between your neighborhood and departments in the city. So knowing yourself is a big key of this. Knowing yourself is also related to managing relationships in a way that strengthens your council and furthers its interests. So knowing how you react and how you are in relationships and trying to be aware of those things so that you can manage them in a positive way so that you can get what you want as a neighborhood council. Also, knowing yourself requires that you accept the reality that you face, and we all are very aware of some of the realities that neighborhood councils face. Some of those things are how long it takes to get something to happen, right? That is one of the realities, but if that's a reality and we happen to have an impatient bone in ourselves, what is that about yourself and how can you work with that so that you can continue to be a part of that process and make sure that in 2 years what you want done actually happens. Also, it requires that you act with both creativity and discipline. So that is twofold. Knowing yourself is about being creative with, if you know something about yourself, being creative with how you react then to a situation or how you're involved. And it requires discipline on constantly reflecting on any kind of engagement that you have with people. So if you're out there as a change agent and you've knocked on a neighbor's door and you talk to them about an issue and you walk away, before you get to the next door, reflecting on how that went, how yourself contributed to that, using that, and then knocking on the next door to talk to people. As well as, it requires the change agents that work together, so a lot of you work together, to also have that creativity and discipline with each other. So those are kind of the pieces. And then finally, as an organizer, as a change agent, whatever you want to call us as leaders, there are definite rules to live by. And these are things that I take to heart and that I try to remember on a daily basis. And we'll get to that one later. That I try to remember on a daily basis because it helps me be healthy. It helps me be able to do this work year after year after year. And it helps me not lose some of those really bad parts about my personal awareness, my frustration. I have an impatient bone sometimes. So these rules to live by can help you with those things that you know about yourself. First, prevent yourself from the disease of being right. We all know that we all have an opinion. And that opinion is very useful, and you have to give it. But you also, part of being a leader and an organizer and a change agent is being able to hear what other people say as well. Trying to figure out how what they say might fit into some of the things that you believe in and others believe in, and how can you work together to make sure that pieces of what everybody wants is in there. So it's not always about being right, but also letting others be right and figuring out how to work together. Listen as aggressively as you speak. Many of us do this work because we're really good at speaking about what we want. We're really passionate about it, we have really good talking points about it. But again, it goes up to the disease of being right. Listening as well as you speak is a big key in being an organizer. So listening to what others want and truly trying to figure out how you can work together given what other people want. You can't hold people accountable for things they don't know. So one of the big things is that I do, I'm talking to people. I was actually just at South 39th Street's neighborhood council, and somebody who is very knowledgeable was talking about, how ballot initiatives get passed, or not ballot initiatives, mill levies, but didn't really know the information that was pertinent as far as mail-in ballots versus general elections and those kinds of things. But I didn't hold him accountable for not knowing that, and I don't even know maybe if he should have known that or not. More, I just let him do his information and pulled him aside when he was done and said, you might want to know this. And it's not, a lot of times people will be frustrated. Well, you didn't know that, you should know that, and you shouldn't be telling the public these things. But really, just letting them know, saying, I thought you should know that, so the next time you present that, the information is correct, and people won't get frustrated. And that's a hard thing for us to do, is when we're talking to neighbors in our area, and they don't know. And they're kind of talking off of things they don't know. And we have a tendency to just jump in and be like, well, you don't know what you're talking about, and you obviously didn't read this report, and didn't you look at this, and you're not informed. Don't hold them accountable for what they don't know. Teach them. As change agents and organizers, we're there to teach people and say, oh, well, you said this. Did you know that in this report, this is actually the information? And people will more likely respond to that and say, no, I didn't know. Where can I get that report? I didn't know it was available. So, making sure, because that's part of the relationship building, is that they might not know, but your job is in a very working together kind of way, making sure that they know what the information is then, if they're not coming from an informed part. And then finally, declare your needs in a way that people can act on them. And so, we can say, oh, it's a good one. We can say that we want sidewalks and infrastructure in Missoula, and that's a priority for neighborhood councils. We want that infrastructure, we need it. We need it to be safer. Most neighborhoods don't have it. And then we can stop there. But how are people going to act on that? How can they be involved? So if you're talking with people, what are you trying to do to make sure that happens? What can they do to become part of that process? How can they act on what's happening in your neighborhood? So being very specific, we really need people to knock on 10 doors each and talk to neighbors about why this is important. We really need people to call their neighbors. We really need people to help us pull this event together so that we can educate people on why sidewalks and infrastructure are important. So what is it that you need specifically? So that's part of the personal awareness of this. And personal awareness, again, is through each step of that life cycle. It happens anytime you talk to somebody, anytime you have a meeting. It should always be a personal reflection as well as group reflection on what happened and what we should do differently next time. So really quick, I want to introduce an activity, an exercise, to have all of you think about some of those personal things about yourself. So to get to know yourselves, I would like for people to pair up with a partner. So think about a partner you can pair up with. And looking up the rules to live by, I want people to take 5 minutes with their partner and identify the strengths that you bring given those rules to live by.
Hey, wait a minute. There's some more rules under.
Are there more rules? Oh, sorry. Let's do those first. I made the posters. Also, don't badmouth people. So bad-mouthing people, we all know where that gets. That just creates enemies. It's really hard to do collaborative work when we have enemies because we talk about behind people's backs. If you allow people to let you do all the work, they probably will. And we've talked about this. Making sure that when new leaders come in and you have a leadership team, that everybody has a duty. They know what that duty is, and they know that that's required of them when you're holding meetings, when you're setting up meetings, when you're trying to pull things together. Because, like me, I tend to be organized. I will do it all. I can get it done. Don't worry about it. But it's not effective. And especially if you're trying to create a team. If you're trying to create a team that helps do neighborhood change, and you should do this with each other, it shouldn't just be one person, then you need to make sure that everybody has a role. And even if you can do it yourself, it's not necessarily the best thing. You're going to burn out faster. You're not going to want to be involved as long. So making sure that everybody has a role. And avoid taking up too much room in a conversation or in the action of the group. And that's one of the things that's difficult because we do lead a lot of the neighborhood council meetings, right? But making sure that we have other speakers come in and talk, we have varying viewpoints come in and talk, we allow neighbors to give it their opinions and what they think about the issue. And then you can say, the leadership team feels this way, what do people think about that? But it should really be people giving the leadership team direction and guidance and making sure that you're listening as well as speaking, because you do play a role in there. So making sure that you allow balanced time for everybody's opinions. Okay, now let's go. The rules to live by are in your book. And I'd like you to partner up, and for the next 5 minutes, I'd like you to identify with your partner the strengths that you have as a change agent. And I'm going to go ahead and hang up some of these on the wall so that you can see them. Okay? So take 5 minutes to do that. And for those of you that want to share what some of your strengths are, some of your challenges, or any of the things that you got out of talking with your partner, I'd like to take an opportunity so that we can learn from each other, and maybe something that you say might actually, somebody else might say, oh, I didn't even think about that for myself. So who can share something? Jan?
Well, this is one that people will let you do it if you're willing to.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, we both carry an awful lot of water for people. And I would guess that in this room, we're all pretty good water carriers. And setting limits. And that's something we need to know, because if you've taken on too much, then you can't do any of them.
Right.
Any of these things.
You can't do any of them well, yeah. And I think you're right. I think many of us, just because we're here today and we're interested in getting training about this, it's more likely that we take on a lot of the responsibilities. So, anything else? What else did some people learn or want to share?
Well, on 7, I try not to do this, but I've noticed people, whether they're on the leadership team or the ones that come to the thing, and it's not just the neighborhood, it's other people, that they'll, the people that are more quiet, more shy, but they have a lot to give, get pushed down because some people are letting your mouth just go and go and go.
And we'll talk a little bit later about facilitating and different techniques you can use to help that situation. Yeah.
And then you lose time. Your efficiency is not there.
Exactly. Okay. John, you had something?
I think I was reflecting a lot on the right sense of being right or self-righteousness. I was talking about, I think everybody has a sense of something on the other side of the fence or a little ways upstream that doesn't flow the rest of the fish drifting downstream. You don't really sense the way we do about community. And how do you have to learn to convey that without appearing to be self-righteous.
Right.
Well, educate people, like educating and informing people, but making sure to get their feedback as much as possible, not appear to be controlling
Yeah. And that's such a delicate, fine balance. And it is really because all of us come to what we do with such a passion. We believe in something. But in order to get people to join us, and we need more people in order to get the work done or to promote an opinion, to have the city take on the issue or any of those kinds of things, we have to make sure that we're giving information and educating, asking how, saying, well, we need action in this way, but also that community need part in the circle. What is their need and what do they want? So making sure that throughout the work of neighborhoods that we make sure that we're doing what other people want, that we're asking for their opinion, but also educating and informing, having them be involved, and trying not at the same time to lead the agenda, saying, well, we're doing this because we've heard from the neighborhood in these ways that this has to be done. And it might be something that you were passionate about, but the neighborhood is too, so then you can take it on. But trying to figure out how to get all that together so that it becomes something that everybody wants. And that is a really, really hard balance to do. So, what else did people want to share? Anybody? Christine?
I think it's important for that personal awareness too, is that the longer you're involved with something, you have a lot of history, your need is probably different than the general community's need. And it's really easy to create separation there and to burn yourself out of your needs or anything. So I find doing this kind of work is really important. Really be aware of what your needs are, but finding a way that what the community's need is, you can identify with and foster that, and foster that. That's really important.
Okay.
Yeah, having some separation from personal and personal, whatever, enthusiasm and public enthusiasm is really important. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where like listening, really comes in, because you might, and I don't want to say it's better or higher, but you might be up here for your needs, like Maslow's hierarchy. And the community's need, most of them might be here. So bring yourself that level where you can listen and get enthused for them. Maybe that will bring you some of those feelings in yourself of how you got here. Be very aware of that process and where you're at and how you can relate to your general community.
All right. Well, again, this was really just to focus on and for all of you to think about and take with you in the neighborhood work that you do, that there is a personal component to all of this work that we do. And knowing yourselves personally and being aware of what your challenges are, your strengths are, what some of your triggers might be, where you might need to get a little bit better at some of the skills that you're involved in, but also just reflecting. Really, personal awareness is just taking that moment after a meeting, after a conversation, after any of those kinds of things that you're doing to say, in what way, if this went well, in what way did I contribute to it going well? If it went bad, in what way did I contribute to it going bad? And then learning, because that's all we can do, is enter these situations, step back and reflect, see where we took a part in it, and then knowing if it was good, how to keep that in different things that we do, and if it was something that inhibited the relationship, what we could do better next time. Because that's all we can do. But if we don't take that step to learn, then we'll always continue to repeat the same thing, and then you may not get to where you need to be. So that's what personal awareness is all about. All right, Maxine.
Okay. This next section is going to be about engaging with and getting to know the neighborhood. And some of you might be thinking, well, gosh, I've lived there for 30 years. If I don't know my neighborhood, I don't know who else would know my neighborhood. But I think that there are fresh ways to start to look at the neighborhood, or new ways that we may not have thought of. I always use this example because it really helps me think about how we all come from such different perspectives and how we all see things so very differently. And here's my little example. A group of children were asked, basically, what they wanted to see in this new park that was going to be developed in their neighborhood. And all the parents thought, well, we want to put in a great park here with wonderful climbing apparatus for kids and all kinds of swings and things like that. And we really want to make sure that we put in some nice brand new grass so that it's soft and kids will like rolling around on it and playing in it. And however, though, when the children were brought in and asked, what would you really like to see for a park? The kids said they wanted concrete. They didn't want grass. So they had a very different view of their neighborhood. These kids lived in an inner city neighborhood. When they played in the grass before on the park, they'd run into broken glass. There were needles that junkies had used and discarded in the grass, and they were hidden. And so from a child's eye view, from a child's perspective, they didn't want any grass. They didn't want anything that could hide what was underneath there. And so they wanted concrete. So we may have a way of looking at things, and other folks may have an entirely different perspective on it based on their own experiences. So that's good to know, and it's also important to keep in mind. And so in this section, we're going to just hit on 3 different ways of thinking about and getting to know your neighborhood. And one is a cognitive map, or cognitive maps. And the second one is neighborhood statistics. And before I hear all the groans out there about statistics, I'll have to say that this is really the shortest piece that I'll do on statistics, and it won't be very much, but it's important. And then a third piece on what's called listening surveys. And you're going to get a chance to experiment with these, especially with these 3, or these 2 right here. And so the first thing I want to do with you is an exercise. And that exercise is in developing a cognitive map of your neighborhood. And so what we've got behind you there on this back table, and you don't have to rush back there yet, is a number of different kinds of art supplies, some crayons, some magic markers. There's actually some glue sticks back there, and sparkle glue sticks, and sheets of paper. And so on the sheets of paper, in fact, I think maybe the best place to start is I just want you to take 1 minute right now to just close your eyes and to create a visual impression in your head. Imagine, in other words, your neighborhood. Imagine what you see as your neighborhood when you're asked to just sit back for a moment and think about it. What kinds of images come to mind? What pictures do you see? Maybe you see people in your neighborhood that are common faces in your neighborhood. Maybe you see structures there. Maybe you see beautiful gardens and parks. Maybe you see an industrial area. Whatever it is that you see, just let those images come. And then for the exercise, what I'd like you to do is to grab a few art supplies back there, bring them back to your table, and take a few minutes, and I'll let you know how our time works with that, and draw out your image of your neighborhood. You can use words, you can use drawings, you can cut up some sticky notes or tear them. Didn't bring any scissors, I was afraid you might hurt one another. No, only kidding. No scissors in this exercise. So tear up sticky notes, just let yourself go. You don't have to be a great artist to do this. That's not the point. It's to come up with an image. And then I'm going to leave some tape back there, and when you're done, take your image and stick it up on this back wall right behind John, is it? Okay, stick it up right on that back wall, and then we're going to have some discussion, and we'll process this, okay? Is that pretty clear? Does anybody have any questions? Do you have a stretch?
This is kind of an exercise that we weren't in the first, in the cycle still of the neighborhood, like understanding what is right now, and like I want to put those things in there that I have much of watching but aren't real. So we want to be truthful and
Try to imagine what's there, not what could be. That's a whole other exercise, which is really an important exercise as well. I totally agree with that. But what I think we're going to do right now, though, is just try to imagine what you do see now, what is, instead of moving to what could be.
How long do we get?
You get 10 minutes. And then here's another piece with this. I want you to think about this exercise as an activity that you could also use in the neighborhood as a way to engage groups of children about imagining what could be or what is. But it's something that I see as a tool that you can actually apply. So get started. I'll put the tape back there, and then as I said, when you're done, stick them on here. Individually. Yeah, that way, individually we're doing it. That way we've got a number of different perspectives on the same neighborhood, which is good. Okay, a couple more minutes since I stretched it. So we're going to end this at quarter of. So you've got a couple more minutes, and I'll let you know when the last minute is. If you could like shift around to this direction for a minute, I'm going to stay on this side of the room just at least temporarily so that I can get a better view of this. And I hope some of you that are sitting farther away during the lunchtime will get over here and take a closer look at some of these drawings. This is always a little bit intimidating for people because, you know, they think they have to be a great artist. It's sort of like what our kids must go through when they're in school. And it's not about that at all. It's about your personal vision, sort of image of what you, of your neighborhood when you sit back for a minute and have to think about that. And my guess is that there probably aren't too many people out here who've done this before. Is there anybody that's done this before, that's actually sat down and thought, oh, I think I'm going to take a piece of paper and throw some sparkles on it and kind of create this image of my neighborhood? We don't do it. But so that's why it's good. It gets us a little bit out of our comfort zone and gets us thinking about our neighborhood in a different way. And so on that note, I'm wondering if there would be several volunteers who would at least like to come up and point to their picture and tell us what they've done and how come they've done it that way, and tell us a little bit about their neighborhood. And your name is? Patricia. Patricia, great. Patricia, come on up and pick yours out and just tell us about it.
This one's mine, and I have to explain it because it's pretty illegible, but I live in Franklin to the Fort neighborhood, so there's the Fort Park and there's Franklin Park, and in my mind, those are the two big features of our neighborhood, and they're great. And lots of trees and bicycles, people walking, people pushing strollers, dogs in the park, and kids playing in the park, and people playing soccer and stuff like that, and a school.
Great, thanks. Okay. How about someone else? John? Come on up.
This is a fairly rudimentary drawing of Paxton School there. We help helped get that built. Our neighborhood helped get that built. It would have been gone if we had not acted. So we're pretty proud of that. I picture my children coming to run at me when I'm bicycling by during their recess time. I picture kids coming and going, neighborhood. It is a neighborhood focus point. I think it is the primary focus point for me, certainly. Bonner Park, we live nearby. It's got like, I'm sorry. Patricia said, events, celebrations, festivities, all kinds of stuff happening here. And the university, of course, with both its incredible positive points and some of the liabilities that it brings our neighborhood in terms of traffic and housing.
Okay, thanks so much, John. Another volunteer. Come on up. And your name is? Mariah? So,
I live in the Lower Rattlesnake. I started with the U and the river because I love having access to that. Close to the downtown, I got Mount Jumbo, Prescott School, historic homes. This is Duncan and Van Buren, Rattlesnake Creek, and the Greeno Park. We have a lot of wildlife in our neighborhood, a lot of dog walkers, a lot of bicycles. And my red dot is sort of the confluence, the railroad, and freeway crossing, which is like a rough spot in our neighborhood.
nice, go ahead. And your name is?
Carol.
Carol. Okay, Carol.
I moved here and I live 10 miles out of town, so for me to go to the grocery store was a one-day event, or I had to think about it. So I put the grocery store, it's pretty big here, because I go to the grocery store like that. And I love that. If I need something in 5 minutes, I can go get it. And then we have deer, but this neighborhood is fabulous. Because the deer, I have 10, 12 deer sitting out in my backyard every day.
What neighborhood is this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Farviews.
Patty Canyon.
Okay.
And we have mountains, and then the same is true, we have a golf course. We have 2 golf courses. Well, we have 3 golf courses. The university, up the road, and Highlands and Larchmont. So I drew the golf course. They look like notes, but those are golf courses. And then the other thing about this neighborhood is I live on a hill, and every day for the last 4 months, there's this big cloud comes toward us, and it's either rain or snow. And it comes in, and then the sun comes out, and another hour it comes in, and it's like, and I'm used to weather. I love weather, but it's been significant having this. I could call in the news because I see it coming. It's interesting because I think there's a combination of the convenience of being in a city with living in the country. It's a combination of both. It's fabulous.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? One more person you'd like to come up and go ahead.
Okay.
And what's your name?
Roxy,
Roxy?
and I'm also from Franklin to Fort, like Patricia, but I live in a slightly different part of the town, closer to an area that's more car heavy. So it was really congested in my picture, so I thought I'd explain it because you guys probably wouldn't figure it out. But the main focus is just this I just sort of did a snapshot image of this intersection that I go through every day, and it's at Johnson and 14th. And so there's just a lot of cars everywhere. That's basically what these things are. And then there's a tiny bicyclist, and that's me. And then on the other side, well, I was going to draw some trailers, but that's sort of more on this side, because on the other side is more like the heaven side of Franklin to Fort, where there are parks and some people, but the people aren't outside of their house. They're just poking inside and kind of peering out because they're at this heavy street where they can't really walk around because there aren't sidewalks. So it's just one snapshot, but there's a lot more to the neighborhood. So.
Great, thank you. Okay. I have a question for all of you. As you did this exercise, what was it like to actually gather these materials, put them together, and create an image of your neighborhood. What was that like for you to do?
Kind of gave me some reality.
How so?
Because I really like parks and stuff, and my neighborhood really doesn't have any outstanding connection for what's important to me.
So,
It's like a mixed-use area, and, you know, you got Brook Street, which cuts right through the heart of you, and that kind of stuff. So for me, it was really reality.
yeah, it gave you a sense of what's not there that you
Yeah.
really would love. Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Well, it gave me a sense of joy, but we kind of live in an angelic neighborhood.
Real pride, I'm
yes,
hearing come through, yeah.
And we have a real sense of community.
Mhm.
And it is in that neighborhood, in the Franklin Park neighborhood. All the trees are mature,
Mhm.
and you do see a lot of people up walking the street, so you do have community involvement with your neighbors.
There's some real history there too.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
history there.
Okay, great. And you had your hand up, yeah.
I was going to say, as I did it, it made me really think about where I lived. And as I put in the houses, I thought of the people that I did know that lived there and the people that I don't know. And something else that has struck me about this exercise is everyone loves open spaces, parks, places for people to gather and walk and recreate.
Yeah,
So that is
that's a real
something
theme
that's
here.
important in every neighborhood.
Thank you. Thanks for summarizing that too. That was going to be my next question was, you know, do you see some commonalities here and some themes? And I think as you get up during your break and during lunch and look at this, you're going to see exactly what you just mentioned, that there's some real important things to people that come through in these drawings. One final question I wanted to ask you about this exercise before we move on to the next thing is, could you think of a way that this might be a helpful tool for you during your community neighborhood organizing activities or events? And if you have an idea about that, throw it out into the circle here so other people might be able to learn from it. It's John, right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a little bit reminiscent of the first part of the vision of Missoula, that people had a map, were able to put their hands on something, play with something, and they interact in a different way, and they're able to have a conversation about why they feel about it that way, instead of just this conference type thing where people are refuting each other.
Right, we're just talking heads, right? Yeah. Good point. And you brought up another point earlier about the fact that this is also a way, I think I just lost the point, darn.
Were you talking about if we were supposed to project what we
Yes,
want?
that's it, exactly. Thank you so much. That you can use this in a variety of ways. You could use this as a way to say, what is in our community? And you could then use it, you could do what was, what is, and what could be. And so that's another way to think about activities to get people involved in. And you've got another question or a comment.
Comment on how to use it. For me,
Yeah.
it reminded me of how much I don't know my neighborhood. I don't even know where the end is between Lower Rousing and Upper. But if several people had done their map of the Lower Rousing, then afterwards, after you could see all maps, you could add to your map.
Right.
You would know a lot more.
Okay. So it's a good way to learn about what other people do know about the neighborhood. Okay. We have to move on, and this next little section, as I promised you about statistics, is going to be really, really small. So, yeah, okay. You know, Lynette and I were talking about this whole idea of getting to know your neighborhood and getting to know it in so many different ways, like this way that we just did with the cognitive maps. Another really important way to get to know your neighborhood that often speaks loudly to city officials, to county officials, to legislators, is getting to know your neighborhood through numbers. And although that's not often a fun way for a lot of people to get to know their neighborhood, it can be a way that speaks loudly, because numbers are pretty well set down in cement. You know, it's either a 9 or it's a 22. I mean, it's pretty concrete. And so in thinking about this, we thought it would be important for you to at least check out, if you have the capacity to use a computer and go to a website. I wrote down a website for the county, which is, this is actually the Office of Planning and Grants. Sorry, I was going to say Office of Public Assistance. It's the Office of Planning and Grants, and it's their website. And I was just blown away as I took some time this last week to really get into the intricacies of that website. And what it's called, you can get into this one sort of pull-down menu called the Missoula Online Statistical System, or MOS. It's kind of like HAL. No, not really. You know HAL from the movie. But it's a wonderful, as they describe it, a gateway to the Missoula County, only it's through numbers. And you can pull out, this is what I found so fascinating, you can actually pull out small segments of neighborhoods, and you can begin to understand about who lives there, how they're employed, how much money people make, what's the median price of the housing. You can find out all kinds of financial and economic information that can help you create maybe a different kind of image of your neighborhood, one that really is fairly in depth in terms of how many people here are living in poverty, how many people here are renting in our neighborhood, how many people own their homes in our neighborhood, how much mortgage debt do people carry in our neighborhood. That's how minute some of this information is. Ray, did you have a...
Well, if you would, make sure that before you leave this, you tell us how you actually did it.
Yeah, and you know...
I've been there and I didn't know you could do that.
You can, and Lynette's done it a lot, and so Lynette will be your best resource on that. But I only spent maybe like half an hour, 45 minutes in there, and what I really wanted to do was copy things down, because they did a comparison between 1990 and 2000. So you got an opportunity in these statistics to actually make some pretty incredible comparisons. I'm really interested in issues about food security and poverty issues and housing, and what I was able to see were all the little blocks in the community where there's either been a tremendous increase in poverty in some neighborhoods, and in others where there has been a decline. And so it was interesting, and if I could have figured out how to map out where those actual locations were, and I think with a little help I could, then I'd have this, what almost like a GIS map of the city based on some key issues that would be really important to me. And I'm going to pursue that, because I think it's a visual thing that we can actually show people. And what's so fascinating about it for me, from my perspective as a social worker, is way back at the turn of the 1900s, during the Progressive Era in the United States, we had settlement houses in bigger urban areas, and they did a lot of work with the neighborhoods. They were located right in the neighborhoods, almost like a neighborhood center, and they were acutely keyed in to the issues of the neighborhood. And they advocated, as professional people and ministers who'd come and stay at the settlement house, they'd advocate for the neighborhood, they'd help to change policy. And one of the things that they did was a lot of community-based research, which is what I do. And they created what was called the Hull House Maps and Papers, which is a fascinating document that in a neighborhood in Chicago outlined where all the immigrants lived, what their nationality was, how much money they made per hour, and it was all a huge color-coded map. Now think for a minute about what a document like that could really do in terms of addressing certain issues in your neighborhood and bringing them to the forefront, etc. And also in just getting to know how your neighborhood is put together. Go ahead.
There are different groups that take the same, it's all based on the U.S. Census data.
Mhm.
So it's everything.
Yeah,
The Missoula Chamber of Commerce has same information. The Missoula Economic Development Council,
has,
and they do it from a business perspective.
Mhm.
How many, types of businesses and who they employ and whatever their salaries are, that kind of stuff.
right,
So it's
good.
a little different, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, there are a lot of sources for this information, and I found another one if you're interested in county level data. This www.neighborhoodfind.net. I think it's net, not com. I could be wrong on that one. But if you go in there, you can pull up the census data for each county in the state of Montana. And that's a nice overview of what's happening in our county, and then you can look at how those things have changed, how those statistics have changed. Anyway, I want to move on again, sort of like breaking into another thing here. But I wanted to do next was what's called a listening survey. And you have a lot of information in your community toolkit, your neighborhood toolkit, on the listening survey. And I wanted to say, just as a little historical snapshot on the listening surveys, that I first came across these back in the mid 1995, 1996, when I was in the middle of writing a book on all kinds of social justice issues, including neighborhood and community change. And I found a book, a series of books actually, that had been developed by two women who worked a lot in Africa. And they worked in the small villages in Africa to help the community pull together, create micro businesses, etc. And one of the things that they worked with people on doing was doing a listening survey. And I think since that time, it's become a more common thing in the U.S. to do listening surveys. And so we're going to actually do one here today, kind of, at least get you involved in participating in how one would be done. And in your handbook, in your toolkit, there's a sheet, and I don't know what page it's on. Do you see that, Lynette?
It's page 13.
On page 13, I drew up a list of questions. And let me say this first. With these questions, they're ones I created that you could use. There may be a whole bunch of different kinds of questions you might want to be thinking about asking in your own neighborhood. And the way one goes about developing any kinds of questions that they're going to be asking of neighbors is usually get a group together and work together with a group of people in developing what you think would be good questions to ask. So perhaps your leadership team might do that, and then some other representatives from your neighborhood would help you develop your own questions. Now, the ones that I developed here are really influenced by this, it's called appreciative inquiry. It's AI for short, appreciative inquiry. And I've used this method before in doing some other community research here in Missoula around food security issues. And what our task was, and why I thought this method fit so well, our task was that I was working with a group of people at the time who experienced what it was like not to have enough food firsthand. And we had been working together, actually. We worked together for 2 years as a steering committee. And so our task was to find out from people who ran service programs in Missoula County what their jobs were like, what they saw as some of the barriers for people to have access to good, healthy, nutritious foods. And the people who had experienced food insecurity were actually going to go out and in teams of 2 interview directors of programs, which they did. So they interviewed the person who's the director of the housing authority. They interviewed the person who was then the director of the Office of Public Assistance, etc. And in doing this, we thought the best way to do it, to create less defensiveness, because sometimes people get really defensive when they're having to defend their program and their policies, and that wasn't our thing. We didn't want people to get defensive. We just really wanted to find out what they thought and to do so in such a way that would be somewhat disarming. Most of the time when people are asked, well, how come you guys do things this way, and how come your policy's that way, and it's all done in a way that gets people, I think, armed up for the fight. And we just wanted to know their stories. And so as a community neighborhood organizer, I think that that's your role as well. You're there to collect information. You're there as a person to listen to others, not really to share your own story at that point, but to be there as a person who's going to listen to someone else's story. And if you've ever had someone do that for you, just listen to your story, you'll know that there's so much healing and that there's so much positive benefits that come from just being listened to. And I think it's one of the first things people do in terms of developing a relationship. And when you think about neighborhood change, really, what you're really thinking about here is developing relationships. That's really the bottom line, is how to develop and keep relationships and how to do that well. So on that note, I'm going to ask you folks to divide up again. We're going to pair up for this one, and you're going to be asking these questions of each other about your neighborhood. And the questions, as you'll notice as you go through them, are set up in such a way that they're there to elicit some of the strengths and assets of your neighborhood. And what my experience has been about appreciative inquiry is that even if you're asking questions that are framed in a real positive way, that you're going to find people will talk about the problems they see anyway. So we're not asking for that, but we're framing it in a way to get people to look at both assets and the other issues. That makes sense. So we're going to give it a try, and then I'm going to bring you all back together and have some time before lunch to actually process that. We're only going to have about 10 minutes to do this, and so hopefully one partner can take 5 minutes asking some questions of your partner that are on the little sheet in your book, and then you can do a switch, and I'll let you know when 5 minutes is up, and the other person can talk about their neighborhood, and the other person can be the interviewer and ask the questions. Is that fairly clear at this point? Okay, and I'd say switch it around a little bit. Some of you are from the same neighborhoods. Try to find somebody here you don't even know that's from a different neighborhood, and you get to know a little bit more about the county that way. Okay, you can get started. Okay, hate to bring it to a close, but wrap it up quickly. You do keep moving around, which I think is good, or else we'd all probably fall asleep. Of course, the room's a little cool. Too cool for sleep. Okay, everybody. Let's see if I can get a couple more volunteers this time. I would like to see if there are some pairs who would feel okay talking about what doing this exercise was like for you, the questions, and what you learned about your prospective neighborhoods. Hopefully they were different, or even if they were the same neighborhood, my guess is you're going to hear different things. You want to go, John? Or did you have a question?
No.
You want to go? Is your partner, Patricia? You guys okay? Okay, great. So, what was it like?
When I was the interviewer, I found it was really easy to fall into a mode of asking sort of leading questions, or trying to rephrase or refine the question as you move through it, to kind of serve your own interests.
Okay. In researcher school, they tell you that that's a no-no, you know, that you have to stay right with the question. And it would be true if you were going to do a listening survey in your neighborhood, that once those questions are set up, you want to make sure everybody asks the same ones. But thanks for sharing that happens, doesn't it? It's a tendency for sure.
She put the word concrete in there.
Concrete wishes, yeah.
So as far as responding, or?
Yeah, what was it like to be the interviewer? What was it like to be interviewed and ask these questions? What did you learn about the neighborhood?
Having a piece of paper in front of me compared to, say, just being on someone's doorstep and having a more general conversation, will you sign this, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes things just segue into places you don't need to be, so actually having this right in front of me kind of helps.
Keeps you focused. Yep, okay. Patricia?
And when I was interviewing him, I thought it was interesting that when I would ask him if I heard what he was saying, I said, so you're saying blah, 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 and he'd always say, no, it's more like this. So it was good to ask him that, and I thought that I was going off on the wrong track.
Great, that's a great thing to always ask people. Is this what I heard? And you'll find out if you're right or not when you ask that question. Awesome, okay. Well, what did you learn about your prospective neighborhoods? Are you both from the same neighborhood? Okay. Does she see the neighborhood a lot differently than you do in terms of what she takes pride in and the things that she values about living there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I guess I'd say Pat's still more capable of reaching out and grabbing the positive things and then really focus on the negative.
Okay.
That's because I want my dog.
So was it hard for you to elicit any positive things about the neighborhood? Is your name John or Ivan?
It's John in Russian.
Okay.
Ivan.
All right.
John's such a boring name.
I like Ivan. Okay.
It wasn't really hard, it was just, I just had to prompt him a little bit.
Okay.
But he came up with it.
Some things he felt proud about. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Any other pairs, unless you have something else that you wanted to finish up with? No? Okay. She's whispering. Would you like to go, Mike?
I think that us interviewing each other, I think we found out we probably have more things in common than we don't have in common.
In terms of how you see your...
How we see our neighborhood and what's, and things that we enjoy in the neighborhood, where the neighborhood's going. I don't know if she agrees, but.
I agree, yeah. I also, well, listening to him, I did feel that mine was a little bit more idealist about our neighborhood, and listening to him made me think more about the positive, which was really good, and he's really focused on the positive, and he has more focus on the positive, and that was really rewarding, just to hear some of those positive things. Because I've been on the leadership team a little bit longer than he has, and so
I'm new.
it's good to be reminded of those things that being on the leadership team, sometimes you get bogged down by the negative.
Yeah,
And
nice.
so it's good to be reminded by the things that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else, Mike, or is it Roxy? Yeah. Nothing? And I think, Mary, you had your hand
I
up?
wanted to say that we were from two different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And it's quite different with different structures, but there was a compatibility there. And I felt a real positiveness about his place, even though there is the Southgate Mall.
Sitting right in the middle of it all.
I've interviewed her, and I'm not really
their interview is like. Are you all starving and you would like to stop this and go eat? Huh? Got time for one more, I think, if anybody would like to. No?
Can you state the questions?
Sure, I can. The questions were, describe a time when you were proud to be a member of your neighborhood. Why were you proud? What do you value most about living in your neighborhood? Describe 3 concrete wishes you have for your neighborhood. What are they and why? What's your favorite memory of living in your neighborhood? What attracts people to want to live in your neighborhood? Those were the questions.
We
Carol?
came to the last one. Lyle over there came from Reston, Virginia, and I used to live in Northern Virginia. And so we had a common where we moved from and why we moved to Missoula. Because he's new, Les knew than I. But anyway, we had, our neighborhoods are different, but they're both adjacent. And we chose, when we were looking to move here, open space and a view, and that's what our neighborhood has. All
Yeah.
neighborhoods.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Well, I'm going to wrap this up and then turn you all loose onto the table back there where all the food's piled. But real quickly, what we've done so far is that we've addressed on our agenda at least a little bit about the importance of thinking about yourself as the primary neighborhood organizing tool for change. And then the second thing that we were able to do is to at least address a little bit, well, we did talk about the neighborhood change cycle, and then just how to sort of, where am I here? Just getting to, yeah, right, and getting to know your neighborhood, which is this piece. And that there are way more ways than we even had time to talk about here this morning about ways that you can get to know your neighborhood. So this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg, you know, with cognitive maps and with statistics, numbers, and then finally with thinking about how you might use a process like a listening survey informally or even more formally in your neighborhood to actually go out and start to hear what people's concerns are. When I told you at the beginning that when I first became introduced to these, one of the simplest surveys that I'd ever seen was a listening survey, and what they were asking the neighborhood people was, what makes you happy in the neighborhood? What makes you sad? What makes you angry? What makes you want to act? What makes you want to change? What makes you want to do something about it? So the questions are really up to the neighborhood to decide, and it's a great way to get lots of information. Lynette?
And I just want to say in your toolbox, starting on page 14 through quite a few pages here.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's information on listening surveys, or we can call them interviews. And basically, if you decide to do a listening survey in your neighborhood, the role of the interviewer, training your interviewers, the whole process to get it set up so that, like John said, you know, sometimes you're asking a question and you want to ask a leading question. So a lot of that's in there. How to train the interviewers, how to tell them why it's important they stick to the questions, how to make sure interviewers know how to write down the responses in a way that it was heard, and those kinds of things. So that's all in there.
Great. Ivan?
Do we want me to keep this stuff for later?
Yeah, you can just leave it there on the table, that's fine. Yeah, we'll pick it up later. Thanks. Okay, time for lunch, everybody. Go grab
So
some.
so
It's always harder to do a little workshop after lunch than it is before lunch because people start to drop off and get a little sleepy. And we don't have any breaks scheduled, so feel free that if you start to feel like you're your carbs are getting to you and you're starting to drop off on us, get up. Yeah, do a couple. Yeah, right, yeah, right. Do a couple jumping jacks. But we'll try to keep it lively. Lynette and I are both going to do pieces this afternoon. But the first piece here is about getting people involved. And as I listened to all of you before talk about the biggest issues in your neighborhoods, it seemed like that one kept coming up an awful lot about people and getting people to participate. So this section is about getting people involved and giving them a reason to join and all of the above. But I thought what would be important to impress upon you about how important it is to make direct contact with people are some of these statistics that we put together. And these statistics are from the Pew Partnership for Civic Change. And this top one's, I mean, that sort of grabs you, that approximately 90% of the people in the United States believe that working with others is the way to solve community problems. 90%. And they appear ready to take part in community efforts, and the qualifier there is if they're invited. And as you'll see as we roll along here, there are good ways to invite people and less good ways to invite people to participate. And another statistic here is that more than 40% of those not involved would like to be involved, but don't know how or whom to call. So that's 40% of people who aren't participating in your efforts, that all they would need is for someone to make direct contact with them and or someone to say, I'm going to a meeting, why don't you come with me to the meeting? And then finally here, asking people to volunteer. If asked, 63% will volunteer. So again, the main message here, and you'll see it on this piece that we've got in your in the toolkit, is that making direct face-to-face contact is by far the best way to get people to get involved in something. It makes me think back to, you know, all the classes I taught at the university and all the student efforts to put on, like, to do small projects and stuff. And usually one of the first things students would think about in terms of getting people to come to their event would be to make flyers. I mean, if you go to the university and go on campus, you will notice that there are flyers everywhere there could possibly be a flyer, where there's a space for a flyer, and even if it isn't a space for a flyer, there's a flyer there. And when you look at, for example, in your toolkit, and I think we're coming to that pretty quickly, but I think it's on page 26, I kind of created this thing that's a ladder of communication effectiveness. And what you see on that ladder, where is putting a flyer up on the ladder? Yeah, it's on the bottom. So it's not the best way. And then as you take a good, careful look at that ladder, you're going to see that the best way by far is if you've actually made some face-to-face eye contact with someone and asked them to be a part of what you're doing. And then there are increments all along the way there that are somewhat less effective, but more effective than handing out just a flyer. So, I think we've got this piece here. And this is what we're going to talk about next. Go ahead,
I have
Ivan.
a question about, is there any, these all seem to degrade or get better in a pretty even manner. Is there anywhere along there where there's really a huge difference?
You know, that's, yeah, and I don't think that that's set up in such a way where each of those increments are equal increments. It's just saying, you know, this way's better than another way. And it's not like putting up a flyer isn't something you shouldn't do. I think that if you're really going to be successful, that you need to look at how to do multiple methods for getting people involved. It's sort of like what Ginny was talking about this morning. You know, we're not just talking about doing the press release, we're also talking about doing a PSA, as well as making sure that we're on radio and TV. So it's like having a broad stroke or painting a larger canvas so that you'll get people. I mean, maybe the person who you stuck the flyer underneath their windshield is going to come because they're attracted to that particular issue. So flyers can work. So, okay, what we're going to do is look at a four-step and talk about a four-step process here for getting people involved. And then after this, we're going to talk about keeping people involved. So the first step, of course, is making contact with people. The next step is give them a reason to join, then asking them to join. And we're going to do an exercise in here somewhere. I forget where until I get to it. And then number 4 is maintaining their involvement. Because sometimes we're real good at getting people to get to a meeting, but we're not really good at keeping them coming. So we're going to address that too. And make sure that if you have any questions that you fire them off and try to handle them. So I already mentioned a little bit about the ladder of communication effectiveness, and that again, I'll reiterate that the more of those things you do, the more likely the chances are that you'll get people involved. And here, I'll give you a little example. For this last project that I worked on, which was a community-based research project, and what we were looking at were the barriers to and opportunities for food security in Missoula County, that initially we wanted to get people involved, and this is not easy to do, but we wanted to get people involved who had experienced food insecurity. We wanted to work with people so that we would be informed by their experiences and that the whole study would be informed by their experiences. And so thinking about this, what I always heard from everyone is you're never going to get people involved who are living in poverty, people who have limited resources, because their lives are too crazy. You know, they're working 2 or 3 jobs. They have other issues that prevent them from being involved in the community. And if I guess I had listened to that, we wouldn't have had our steering committee of people who worked together for 2 years. And where I found information about how to get people who had limited income involved in projects was not in the United States, but in other countries like Great Britain and New Zealand, where they had created some actual methods for how to get people involved and keep them involved. And they talked about creating an infrastructure of support that would support people's involvements. And yes, it's true that if you're dealing with a single mom who's got, 2 or 3 children and she's working a job, it's going to be really tough to get her and keep her involved. But what we did was we tried to create an infrastructure that would support her participation and involvement. So every time we met, we provided childcare for free. Every time we met, we provided food. So we had dinners together. And if we had meetings during lunch, we had lunches together. And we also paid people for their involvement. Now that might seem odd, and I'm sure that's not what you're going to do on your neighborhood councils, but if you're talking about being a part of a steering committee, generally how that works here in town is that your employer permits you to be on a steering committee or a coalition, and you're representing your agency. And in a sense, you're getting paid for that. And so what we did in our project was that we paid people for their time, and we also paid them in terms of vouchers for the Missoula Community Co-op market. So they could actually take the time they'd spent on the research and use it to buy food over at the co-op. So people were valued for the work that they contributed, and Is that making some sense? You're shaking your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I'll tell you that initially though, when I was trying to find funding for that particular project, what I was being told by people is you'll never get people who have limited resources to be involved, and you shouldn't pay anybody to be involved because you and I don't get paid. And that's where I had to challenge that myth around you and I not getting paid. We do. I know in my job as a university professor, I was on a lot of boards and stuff, and the university paid for me to be involved.
Don't you think that people, leaders, are actually paid in a way that they're receiving some type of reward in their life, like being able to achieve something as a reward for someone?
It is, yes, yeah. And we're not talking about different things here. That's absolutely true. I'm talking about when we put together, this is different than neighborhood councils. And yeah, I'm not suggesting that you would actually pay people to be a part of your council. I'm talking about people being a part of a community steering committee where all the other people are involved are being paid from their jobs. So, but yes, I think there are all these sort of intrinsic things that
There is actually a reward system.
you bet. Yeah, like I know for me, I mean, being involved in certain projects that are things that I'm really interested in really gives me a purpose. And it gets me involved with a group of people who have a similar purpose. And it helps me form relationships with people. So those are some of the things that have nothing at all to do with money. And that's a good point to bring that up. Anyway, so getting back to contacting people, a way to start is that you start with your current contacts and you ask them, and you create, you know, if I had a drawing here, it would look like this spider's web, I think, because you start with who you know, and then you ask them to bring along or to contact somebody else that they know, and then those people bring someone that they know, and you create a giant web there, an expanding web of people. And you do this, at least initially, I think, by face-to-face contacts, by setting up time to meet with people and talk to them. I guess initially when we were setting up the agenda for this meeting, we were thinking about these listening surveys as a prime opportunity. If you had a core group of neighborhood people, for example, who were going to go out and you'd establish some questions, you're going to go door to door, that's a prime opportunity for making face-to-face contacts with people to see if they want to be involved. Any project that I ever did, I never lost the opportunity to have that hand-to-hand contact, and then also to make sure that I placed cards out at the meeting that folks could fill out so they could, here's my contact information, I want to be involved. We did, last fall, we did several town hall meetings. And one town hall meeting was for people who had used services. And we wanted to know if more people wanted to be involved in our effort, and we put cards on the table. And it was more direct, because we were there facing them asking about, you know, do you want to be involved? And if you do, here are these cards. And they filled out their contact information. And out of 30 people who were at the meeting, 29 people after that town hall meeting said they wanted to be involved. 29. And that was a face-to-face sort of thing, where we got people inspired and feeling hopeful, and then folks signed up and said, yes, I'd like to be involved. 29 out of 30. I thought that was pretty good. And so I never lose an opportunity to do that, to have people sign up and get their contact information. The other thing about making contact and getting people involved is that it's constant. It's a constant thing. And as a neighborhood organizer, it's something that should be there, if not in the back of your head, somewhere there at all times when you're meeting people in the neighborhood, that you're always thinking about making contacts and getting people involved. And so it's repeated. It's something that you have to keep doing. And we had to do it with that project too. We did it throughout the life of the entire project, where we had to try to keep getting people involved in the project. As people dropped off, as they got jobs, as they moved away, we wanted to make sure we still had a solid base of people who were participating. And then, as I said before, and I'll just say it one more time, use many methods of communication. So on that ladder, look at using as many methods of communication as you possibly can to get people, to make contact with people. And I think, that's about it with that, unless anybody else here has an idea about a success that you had at getting people, at making contact with people that you want to share. Ivan?
You said that was the Pew did that?
Yeah, Pew Partnership for Civic.
How did, a little bit more about that. How did they get the information? Just through phone survey?
I can look that up for you, but I don't know how they got it.
There's a big difference between talking to someone and what they desire, what they wish they could do in the world.
Right, and I'm
what they really do when it comes down to brass tacks, and that's what it seems
right, yeah.
optimistic.
Well, I think what you're seeing there is people are saying basically that, we believe that that's the way to really make and solve community problems. Involvement and getting involved in it's a whole other issue. But we believe that that is the way to do it, and that's what they're saying. They're not saying, yes, and we get involved and do this, but they're saying we believe that that's a way to do it, that right from the very local level up is a way to start to make some change. You have more control at that level, too, so, yeah.
I'm going to say, before you contact people, you have to really have thought through what you want the particular project to be.
Right.
You need to have researched it. You need to be able to answer all the questions. And you should know a little bit about the people you're contacting so that what you have to say
Connects.
gets their interest back.
Right. Well, I think you wrote the next part of all of this, actually. But these are words of wisdom, I think. What I really appreciate about what you've just said is that the knowledge that you're sharing with us right now is knowledge that you've gained through your experience in doing this, and that you understand, how this works. And we're going to do an exercise coming up here pretty quick called creating a message package, which is that's a fancy word for, not even a fancy word, it's just a word, a phrase, message package for what you just said in a nutshell, which is every single one of those items that you brought up is so essential. The preparedness, the knowing a little bit about people and knowing what it is that's going to attract people on an emotional level to this issue. And having all your ducks in a row is exactly what we're going to do a little bit here. But thanks, I appreciate that. And, where did all this knowledge ever come from in the first place? It came from people going out, making mistakes, and putting this together, and actually then some folks having the time to think they could write it all down and write a book or do a research article. So that's great. Okay, on that note, we're going to talk just real quickly about this, and then we're going to go into doing a message package, which really encapsulates a lot of what was just said. But giving people a reason to join, and this is so important, and it will be in your message package, and we're going to do that all together as a group. But the issue needs to strike an emotional chord as well as an intellectual one with people. So your idea about knowing a little bit about people might, in some cases, you might know a little bit about them and how to say the right thing that would get them involved. And in a nutshell, perhaps, the issue that you're dealing with could strike an emotional chord with a lot of people for a whole bunch of different reasons. So it's important to think about why, number one, does this issue grab you? Why does it grab the people that you know? And so what do you you have to put out in your message that will potentially then grab someone else emotionally and get them thinking on that level about the issue? Because I think, you're right on here. I think the way that people become inspired to act isn't just by what goes on in your brain intellectually. So much of it has to do with what goes on emotionally with us. And so you have to be sending a message that hits both places at once. So, it's also really key if you can think of a way that the issue affects people personally. And if not them, their children. And if not them, the future of the children in our neighborhood. But to start to think about how you can put a message out that gets people thinking about how it affects them on that personal level. And then the next thing here is people who believe what you're doing, they enjoy the activities you do, like some of the people involved, and see that their participation can benefit them, are the strongest candidates for membership. So I'll say that again. People who believe what you're doing, they enjoy the kinds of activities that you put together that you can all participate in. They like some of the other folks that are involved, so they've either got relationship with them or would like to develop relationships with them. And they see that their participation can benefit them, are the strongest candidates. And we'll say this again here today, but something else to think about too as we're talking about getting people involved is that there are many, many different levels of involvement. And although, and I'm like Lynette on this one, I get involved in a project and I give like 100%. I have to be careful that I don't take too much responsibility for that project and its success. And one of the things about that is that my level of involvement in a project isn't the right level of involvement. We'll go back to being right again. And I know I have the right gene. I have a mother who was always right, and her mother was always right. So I have to always be careful that I'm not playing off my heritage there and trying to be right. But I do know that that it's important for those of us who do get invested like 100% in something and give it our all to realize that any level of investment at all is important. That it doesn't matter what someone has to bring to the table, even if it's only coming to a meeting once in a while, every 6 months, that it should be honored as what they can give. And that's hard. That's hard for me. It's a hard one for me. It's one I challenge myself on a lot because I want to see everybody be as involved as I am. And what we really need to do is we really need to sit back and say any level of involvement at all is what someone can give is important. Of course, unless you're dealing with the situation where someone said they're taking on all this stuff and that doesn't happen, that's another case. But did you have something?
No, you have to tag something on that scenario where someone that say shows up once every 6 months as to whether that level of their level is somewhat constructive or.
It depends upon what they're doing for the project. Every 6 months they might volunteer to lick envelopes and put stamps on for a mailing. And that needs to be honored. And I've seen other community organizers do these community asset maps within their neighborhoods where they identify everything that anyone can do and contribute. And it's not all the same thing. Like Mrs. Brown can make wonderful, awesome chocolate chip cookies, and she's willing to do that, once a year for our annual meeting. Far out. That's a contribution. That's the way that she's going to be involved. There will always be the group of people who are more invested. There will be different levels of involvement. Lynette, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think too, acknowledging and honoring people, if you send out a survey, the people who answer are at level of participation that should have some acknowledgement. You know, if you have the time and you know who the surveys came from, send a thank you. If you're doing listening surveys, jotting down addresses and making sure you really thank people for their time, let them know when they can see the survey results. You know, that initial step of just giving their opinion is just the initial step. You can use that initial step to say, okay, well, they gave their opinion, they must, you know, they didn't slam the door in our face, they didn't say, no, I'm not interested. They said, yes, I'm interested in our neighborhood, yes, I'll answer your questions. They answer your questions, you can jot down that address when you leave, you might not know their name, but you can say resident at this address. When you actually present the results, make sure you invite them and say, you answered our questions for our neighborhood survey when we came to your door. We're having the results on this night with a dinner and, you know, whatever. We're going to talk about the results and where to go next, and we'd like you to come. Now, all of those people who answered probably won't come, but you don't know who they are, so you have to value that they did answer and then put it out there for them to come and learn more. And those are the things, you know, they're just as important as the people who are there every day. So.
And everybody has something they can offer. And it's not all the same thing. It's not all the same thing. And it's up to us to start to think about what do we need and what kind of people then do we need for certain things, or who can contribute certain things. We're going to move now into, so we stay kind of in the same ballpark here, but to talk a little bit about this thing called a message package. And I think in the folder that you have in your toolkit, on page, I should have written this down, on page 27, there's an outline there, kind of a basic outline, about the elements that ought to be communicated in a message package. And Marcia, I think, was really summarizing all of that for us earlier, about having an idea in your head before you even contact anybody about what's my purpose here? What am I asking people to do? How am I gonna get people to connect with this project, with this effort on an emotional level? How do I get them to connect with it on an intellectual level? So I thought that what we could do here, for the sake of time this afternoon, we're going to have you all divide up and do your own message package. But I think what we should do is do one as a total group, and that way we'll at least have a message package. And we wanted to gear this message package to an issue that you've been bringing up, which is how do we get people to participate in our neighborhood council meetings? So we thought it would be good as a group for us to brainstorm by developing a message package that you could actually use to get some folks involved in your neighborhood council meetings. Okay? So on that note, we're just going to brainstorm stuff that you come up with. And remember, in a brainstorm, there are no right answers necessarily. In fact, we don't want to stop the creative process. So you come up with some ideas, let's get them up there, and then we'll refine them. And so where we're going to start is, and your task is, again, to create a message package for getting people to come to a neighborhood council meeting. Okay? And maybe you've done some of this before. So what's the purpose? What's the goal or the aim? What would you be telling people when you contacted them about why you wanted them to come to your neighborhood council meeting? And let me just ask real quickly, are your meetings generally organized around a particular planning effort that you have going, or is it a general meeting to find out from people what the issues are that they would like to do some organizing and planning around? Maybe
I think it's both, as well as to give information to the neighborhood about what's happening in their neighborhood.
Okay.
So it can take a variety of forms.
Okay, so,
One of the primary purposes, as I see it, is that in order for the city government to take it more seriously, we have broader representation.
great. And you know, this whole idea, I mean, also seems to me to be a way either to connect with people emotionally and intellectually. To say, you know, you can get representation. You can get it yourself here. You can start to have a voice. Okay? Other ideas about purpose. Maybe multifold purpose here.
Networking,
So,
opportunities for networking and building relationships in our community. For the
meet your neighbors, opportunity to connect and build relationships. Great. And then I think, Patricia, did you have your hand up?
I was going to say pretty much the same thing.
Okay, all right. Thanks. Other thoughts about purpose? Goals, purpose, aims of a meeting? Ray?
Well, I'm having a little trouble defining what I'm thinking, but sometimes I think we feel like we're dealing with such a small group of people, we really don't understand what the neighborhood really wants.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of, I see that as not just that we're representing, that we're developing the neighborhood, but we're really trying to find out what the neighborhood really wants.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's-
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. Very to the point. And did you? Identify needs, Christine said. Yeah. Other thoughts on goals, purpose, aims? So, I mean, I think you've got quite a few things here.
I
Okay.
think there's one more too, and that is the dreams. What do people really want?
Okay. Vision,
The vision.
the dreams, yeah. Hopes, dreams, aspirations, vision. Nice. Okay.
Can I just add one more?
Yeah.
It just seems like, with so many families, two earners in the household.
Two wage earners. Yeah. Mhm.
It just, I'm not sure how to do this. People feel isolated. Lots of times neighbors don't know neighbors. And there's a real feeling of safety and fulfillment of life that comes from a feeling of belonging to something. And that comes with a connection, I realize, but that's why.
Yeah.
We need to feel connected is because you feel, everybody needs to have a feeling of belonging somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah. Okay. Nice job. Anything else that goes on this piece? No? Okay. And I think there's going to be some overlap here, it seems like, when we talk about purpose. The next piece of a message package is the importance of the effort. And in this case, it would be the importance of bringing people together in your neighborhood. And it seems to me that some of what you've got here overlaps into, or is the same as, you know, what's important here? Why do we want to bring people together? Why is it important to have a neighborhood council? Why is it important to bring folks together to participate in a neighborhood council? Are there things that come to mind here that even if they do overlap, you know, what is important here? Why is this important? Patricia?
I think the feeling of belonging and building relationships in the neighborhood is what's the importance of it.
Okay. And Ivan?
It just leads from the first one I said about getting the city to pay attention, and it is fairly easy to get them to pay attention, but it has to do with the validity, how the
Strength in numbers?
So it's the validity of the message. Right.
Okay. So the more people involved?
It gets our attention.
Sure.
It has to do with saying, how they weight it, I guess is the way to say it. How
Yeah.
issues weight.
The importance of this issue is really, can be looked at as represented by the number of people that are voicing their concerns about it. Yeah. Okay, and then Mike, you had something,
Well, I
and then
think
we'll go to Carol.
I think it gives them the opportunity for the individual person to have a voice.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then Carol, you had something?
Well, I don't know where this belongs, but I was thinking of the feeling of belonging, the last one,
Mm-hmm.
when,
This one right here, right?
if you live in the country, I think more than the city, there's a fire, there's a safety issue, there's a crime, neighborhood watch, things that really affect the personal safety of the individual in a setting. And I don't see it there, but I think that's, some of the neighborhood meetings I mentioned out here have involved, burglaries in the neighborhood, issues that are really important to a lot of elderly people who live alone, single women who live alone. So I'm not sure where it falls, but I think that's a reason to participate in your neighborhood, is because if you need help in that way, that's where you can find it.
Okay.
Develop a support system, maybe? Develop a support system?
Yeah, support system.
But twice now I've heard the word safety come up. I heard you mention safety, and then Carol, you mentioned safety too. So that needs to. I'm not sure exactly.
I'm thinking of terrible things, and I haven't personally had this, but some person falls down, or they're there a week and they're dead, and nobody knows it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's weird to me, to be honest. But I don't think it happens that often. But that's kind of an emergency situation where people need contact.
Yeah. Okay. And Christine?
Well, it's building that comfort level is easier to probably put someone that you know or know of or whatever, than approach a stranger.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's all about like building relationships and knowing who your neighbors are and caring about what happens to your neighbor. And
Did you have something?
Kind of a broader principle view on this is just strictly appealing to people's sense of democracy building, and how important it is for people to be engaged or maintain the avenues for being engaged.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The sense of, it has to do with the sense of being empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So it's democracy building.
Or using your power, absolutely, and having a voice. Okay. So, other thoughts on importance before we move to the next one was giving people an idea of what you intend to do.
so that when stuff hits the fan, you have a cohesive group of people that you don't have to start from the basics, so you can really work on problems instead of being divisive.
Is this in response to?
The importance of,
Yeah, okay, importance.
it's back.
All right, and so then the next piece is, what's the message here about what you intend to do? I mean, people want to know before people probably in general, I'd say, don't want to go to a meeting unless they have to go to a meeting. I mean, how many meetings do people go to that are oftentimes not very good and not very well run? And so what do you tell people about what you intend to do at this gathering, at this meeting? Ray, did you?
The first reaction I have is that if all those things that we're talking about, as far as purpose, it's really, you tell them that's what you want to do, so then you need to do it. Which is, it's almost like a charretting process or something, or small group tables that then report out or something like that at their meeting.
Okay, so you actually tell them about the process that's going to happen at the meeting?
Yeah.
That we're going to be dividing up into some small groups and have some discussions about these issues?
And we'd like you to come up with what you think, for you.
And we'd like you to have a voice and be included in it, right? Yeah, what your perspective is, okay? So that's one thought. I mean, not all of you might want to do that particular process, although it's a good one. It's certainly a good one to get things going, isn't it? It's like a town hall meeting, the charrette process, breaking people up into small groups. Everyone is basically answering some of the same questions, and then you're bringing back at some point all the information that they helped generate. And I think that's really pretty powerful. So other things about what you would tell them that you intend to do is, go ahead.
Well, it seems like you come up with a variety of issues and books to bring people in, but somewhere you've got to have a prioritizing process, because you're not going to work on everything at once.
No, right. Okay. So what would you tell them? So what would be your priorities? Let me ask you that instead, for that initial meeting of trying to get people at the council meetings.
If there is an issue that's universal, that you think everyone would be interested in, that's fine.
Okay.
If not, you might have to use the process that Ray was talking about to see which issue might be of prime importance to the most people.
Okay.
So that, or you can give them
You
specific.
could even add to it, couldn't you, in a way? I mean, once you get the feedback, would be, well, like what they did with the South Campus Master Plan. Where they then had like everybody sort of voted, have their little buttons.
Yeah. Put their little,
Yeah, which they thought was the most important.
right. Okay. Just, so we got that? And then Ivan again.
So kind of identify, that's the moment what I've seen when you lose about half the people, because then when they see those results come in, and if their pet issue, there's kind of ended at the bottom. So this is something that should be up there, but then it's a matter of trying to convey that we can still support those other issues that are out there to what extent is possible and what energy they want to put into it. So, yes, you can't try to do everything, but if there's somebody that's really passionate about something, they should be supported, even if there's not anybody else that can directly work on it.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why I've seen people drop out.
Because it's not about the issue that they want to be discussing. Yeah. Let's see if we can figure this one out a little bit more too.
Well, one of the things that I guess what you could do is if there is, you can say this is the priority, but we can build steering committees around other people if somebody really wants to lead an effort. So, you could talk to them about that. Try and pick a priority as well as form committees on other issues that we can work on that will become priorities, down the road.
So you don't lose the momentum, keep people
They
involved.
become the chairman of their own committee is what
Yeah.
usually happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Patricia and then Marcia again.
The thing with that is that even if a person doesn't get their own project, their own pet project on the agenda this time, I think we need to make the point that minority opinion is valuable for guiding the group process. And people owe it to the group to show up and express their opinion, even if it is the minority opinion.
And there needs to be space created for the minority opinion. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you some other questions about what you intend to do. Here you're envisioning that you're gathering people together for a meeting, and you're going to tell them what you're going to do at the meeting. Are there other things that you want to do at this meeting that you think would be ways that would keep people coming or help make connections across people. That's sort of food. Yeah.
Brainstorm for solutions, don't just have a meet and break session.
Yeah.
We have that right there.
Yeah, that's up there.
Okay.
Yeah. So you want to have food. And is there anything else that you want to
Well, I
have?
think you need some kind of icebreaker too.
Okay, like what would you suggest, Ray, for icebreakers? Huh?
Bingo.
Bingo!
There you go.
Have them do this, draw their concept of the neighborhood.
They could draw their concept of the neighborhood for an icebreaker. That'd be great, actually. That'd be a great exercise. What? Big Twister. Put that down too. Twister, doing a concept, a cognitive map of, where the community is, what you would like it to be, perhaps. Getting people involved in it that way. Doing an activity, in other words. But I like that whole idea of an icebreaker, and there's got to be some kind of an icebreaker and a social thing where you get, that's got to be fun.
We did the one at the orientation where it was called categories. I would announce a category like I'm left-handed or right-handed, and they would have to get in groups and then introduce themselves. And then which way do you lick a cone up and down, twist it, or do you just bite it? So that was 3 categories, and they had to so fun things, and then they had to introduce themselves in a small group. So
Great.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Neighborhood trivia too.
Neighborhood trivia.
There you go. You could actually create a neighborhood trivia game, couldn't you? That'd be really fun.
That would be fun.
That's an excellent idea. Other thoughts from this group over here? No? Okay. All right. I'm not even checking the time anymore, and I know I should.
I do have
Be in trouble. You got another one?
That comes up with the rattlesnake meetings is the school use. The acoustics are so bad that there are people who don't go to the meeting because the acoustics don't work. So
Okay.
the comfort of your meeting place, the usability.
Okay, is everybody hearing that one? This is really important too. It's like thinking about what's the environment of this place that I'm having a meeting. Could you speak to that again so everyone could hear you?
Well, this is from experience in the Lower Rattlesnake. We meet in a school, and the acoustics are so bad that you can't hear. It's a nice space, it's warm, it's not raining on your head, but you can't hear. So why bother going to a meeting when a bunch of people are going to blabber forever, and you're struggling to hear them all the time? And I am not deaf, and I can't hear. So I know that when there's people more elderly than I am, and when there's babies crying, and so just does your workspace.
Yeah.
And
Thinking
also,
about the
on
environment.
top of that too, I was just at a meeting at Grant Creek, and they had a mic so that people could hear, and 2 speakers refused to use it, and on each occasion that a speaker refused to use it, people left. And so you have to make sure that the speakers understand why it's important. They were like, I'm not a microphone person, I have a loud enough voice, but that's not the point of why they had the microphone there.
Yeah.
So.
And in ours, if they yell, it just bounces off the wall.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna. Sorry?
It's a school gym, right?
Okay. Here's the last thing on your message package that's important, and that is to tell people the types of things that they can do to help. And the types of things they can do to help should range across activities that are real fun activities, planning social events, for example, things that are really pretty simple to do and things they could do from their home, like making phone calls, addressing envelopes, etc. And things that are really, really important, things like contacting your city council person, things like writing letters to the editor, things like developing a PSA for an event, etc. So what are some of the things that you would tell people at your event, at your meeting, that are things they could do? I know I've listed off a bunch, but you probably have some other ones. Carol, you had your...
You have an example, a good example. I like the block by block organizing. The reason is most people know 1 or 2 people on the block. And if they know, I mean, I know the two people on my side, and they know the people on their side. So you have someone responsible for just doing that one block. Most people will do one block.
You bet.
you know.
Yeah, most people will make 5 phone calls.
Yeah, one block,
Right?
and that's it.
Yeah, yeah, most people aren't gonna make 50, okay? So if you have things organized in that way, and it's easy, it's easy, they know how long's that gonna take me. Take me about 15 minutes, I got 15 minutes, everybody's got 15 minutes, we can all do it. And so instead of you, the organizer, and I should be the one to talk about some of this, instead of you having to go to every single block in your neighborhood and talk to everyone, you've got everyone getting involved in the effort. And I think one of the things that Ginny talked about frequently this morning was the whole idea of really creating a collaborative effort, one where everyone is a part of the solution, everyone has a task to perform, and again, it could be as small as, although I don't know that making cookies is such a small task actually, but it could be so much as making cookies once a year for the annual meeting, all the way up to people who are willing to get on a telephone tree and call people for the meetings, or pass out flyers, or do surveys door to door, that kind of thing. Other things here on the things that you would do, or that you can have people do, that range from very much the very simple all the way to the more complex.
Website updates.
See that?
Doing website work.
They have their own websites.
Yeah.
For our office.
Right. Website updates.
You could do the childcare.
Yeah, childcare.
Yeah, childcare.
When you're talking about writing a letter to the editor, would a person just represent themselves, or would they say they're representing the neighborhood council when they sign that letter?
I'm not sure.
If
how you do
usually
that.
what we do, I've done in the past with groups, if I want people to write a letter to the editor, I hand out talking points, and then I would say, at the bottom, sign it as your name, a part of, a member or resident of this neighborhood council. So not necessarily that they're part of the leadership team or that's the views of the entire neighborhood, but that's where they live. So that they don't make anybody angry and say, well, I don't think that that's my opinion and I live there. But they can just say, Lynette Diaz is a part of the West Side Neighborhood Council, or a member of the West Side Neighborhood Council, or a resident of the West Side Neighborhood Council. Resident's probably better to say it that way. And then, they can use the talking points to write the letter to the editor. The editor. Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I said editor wrong. I don't know.
Okay.
Along that lines, though, I think it's fair to say that if a decision is made
Yeah.
at a neighborhood council meeting,
Yeah.
and everybody votes on it, and they're supportive of it, that one person writes a letter to the editor from that neighborhood council, you should feel proud of what you're making
Yeah, that's
as a
definitely.
representative for that neighborhood. And if it stirs up some opposition within your neighborhood, well, next time they can come to the meeting and vote.
Exactly. That's true. That's very true.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, we're going to move on from this and just wrap it up here real quickly, though, to say, Carol pointed out that in the toolkit, there's just a ton of information in there about block by block organizing, door knocking, just a ton of information that you can draw on to help you with this piece. And one more thing I'd say about the message package is that before you start making those contacts as a leadership team, it would be important to sit down and to write out what that message package is, and to have those various segments committed at least somewhat to memory, so that when you went door to door and asked people to come, or if you composed a letter to the neighborhood, you hit each of those points in your message package. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Here's another thing I thought it would be important to just say, is that make your requests to people unapologetically. when you're asking people to be involved. Realize that people may not want to join on, but may want to help occasionally. Again, don't miss out on that occasional helper too. So different levels of involvement are really okay. And then make sure that you're asking specifically for what you need and include very, very clear options for participation. And ask for a few things at first, and then as people become more and more involved and more competent at it, then you can ask for more. And then finally, and this is important, I used to think otherwise, but I don't think I think this anymore. Remember, you don't need to convince people. You don't need to have people who aren't interested. You don't need to keep trying to convince people and waste your energy trying to convince people that they need to be involved. That's not what it's about. Okay, okay. So that's that piece. And what we're going to do next here, and we're running a little bit late, so I'm not sure how much of all this we can get in. But the next piece is about keeping people involved. And okay. Let me just quickly. Okay, I don't think it's going to take very long to go through this, but this is about maintaining people's involvement. And it is a matter, to maintain people's involvement, it's a matter of responding to some of their basic needs, just like you've been talking about. People's need for inclusion, people's need for affection and recognition and accomplishment. So it's always thinking about making sure that you say thank you. I mean, I think of that as being one of the key things for no matter what it is that people contributed, to send a thank you note, to remember to say to people how pleased you are that they contributed and what they did and what their strengths are and their skills are that you see. And always remembering, I think, what you said over here, and I don't know your first name.
Oh, Joe.
Joe. Yeah, what Joe said about just this basic human need to feel like you belong to something, to feel included in something. And so that's extremely important. And then making a very special effort with new people who come, with the person who comes for the first time, and making a real special effort to make sure that they feel welcome. And connecting them to other people in the community that you know, in the neighborhood that you know, who might share similar interests. So getting them connected in. And then keeping an eye out for what someone has as a skill. I mean, I think this is a skill itself, is to start to identify as an organizer what it is that people are really, really good at, you know, and recognizing what you may not be so great at. And therefore, trying to find people who you can plug into various roles or various tasks because they're far better at it than other people are. So always keeping an eye out for special skills and believing that everyone has something to offer. Everyone has something to offer. And give people something to do, the sooner the better. So in other words, even at a first initial meeting, it would be important to try to think of ways, no matter how small, that people could actually do something and accomplish something for the group.
And it could be asking them to talk to their neighbor about the issue and bring it back to the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Asking them, and then they feel responsible for coming back and saying,
One task, yeah.
I talked to my neighbor, actually talked to 3, and this is what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's very small, it's still something that gets them to come back, and then they feel like they're part of it.
And it might be different tasks for different people, but it could be a task for the entire group that is, just like Lynette said, you know, speak to one person that you don't see in this room right now till our next meeting and find out from them what they think about the issues that we talked about and bring that back to us. Boy, that creates like this lifeline between that person and the group, and it starts to connect someone else from the outside that's not there to the group. Patricia?
I'm willing to take the adversary part of that argument because I've attended meetings where all I wanted to do was just go and listen, just to maintain that much connection, but I did not have any time or energy to offer for even, one conversation with someone else. And I know some people, myself included, can feel kind of put upon when everybody always expects you to do something if you show up for a meeting, so you don't want to show up for the meeting at all.
Right.
So I think that, we have to honor those people that just want to show up for the meeting and not do anything.
Right, and showing up for the meeting is doing something, and we have to look at it that way. That's right, yeah, and I agree with you. There are some times when you just can't do anything else, and your time is totally taken up. But so that's a really good point. And I think we already talked about this, about offering a range of tasks for people to do so they can choose or not choose, however that might be. Think about what it is that you need first. And what I've always done too is had on the cards where they put their identifying information to have them also write down, if not check a box based on what it is we know that we need, what they would be willing to help with, and also either write in what it is that they would be willing to help with. And if now's not a time for them to help, that's okay too. So, and we've hit on this a number of times about being careful not to take all that responsibility yourself, and that one of your primary functions really is to help build leadership capacity in your neighborhood. And so that means, as you can, giving people things to do so they can stretch their own skills, build their own skills, and take on things themselves. So, and that's a hard one, again, because I think sometimes some of us are reluctant to pass things off because we fear it won't get done. And so then that means we need to stay on top of making sure it does get done. But that's a tricky one, too. And the other thing I think that's been real effective is I'm more inclined, I was thinking about this the other day, a lot of people go and work out, for example, every day, and they seem to be able to manage to do that on their own. Well, I don't. The only way I stay working out is like for the last, I'm not sure how many years, I work out with a group of women every day at noon. And I may miss because I'm out of town, but I feel a sense of responsibility to my group to be there. And so I go. Now, if I were left on my own to go spin class or do whatever else I do, I probably wouldn't do it. But I have a group there that I've developed relationships with. So when you're thinking about tasks and people doing things, think about it in terms of 2 or 3 people working together on something. Think about, if there's envelopes to be stuffed, and there's stamps to be put on something, that it isn't one person's job, that you can have a little, what we call work parties over at the food co-op. I'm a board member of the Missoula Community Food Co-op. And so we have Saturday work parties. And Saturday work parties means that everybody's working in the back room on some construction project or painting together. And it's a heck of a lot more fun to do some of this stuff with a small group of people, and then we have food, and we get to talk, and you get to meet new people. So think about some of these things as not as, sort of the lone wolf activities, but activities where people are paired up, and so then they're responsible to each other to get the task done. That's another good thing to do. And then something that I'm pretty keen on and think is really important in keeping people involved and maintaining their involvement is that you have to just take time that has nothing to do with your effort at all, where you get together and you do something that's all about celebrating the work that you've done so far. Whether you've achieved a whole heck of a lot or not isn't really the important thing. It's taking the time to honor the time that you put in together. It's taking that time to develop a relationship that might be separate from all those other things that you ordinarily talk about. And the celebration time can also be a time to sit back and celebrate your successes and what you've learned too. And that's, I think, pretty important. Ivan?
That's a problem for us. We can't
be connected to a neighborhood activity, and as long as the leaders are getting together to celebrate their work, I'm the one who approves them. I would approve that.
Now everybody knows
I
this.
would approve that because of the fact that that helps leaders not get burnt out, it helps leaders continue to do their work, it helps leaders, it's such an essential part, and leaders are an essential part to neighborhood councils, and it's such an essential part to making sure that your work continues. So for me, that's completely detached to your $800 budget.
The way it reads, it reads that we've had to try to work to attach some kind of work product or presentation or something to the social component of it.
Well, if you're reflecting though, I mean, if it's a reflection and celebration.
Reflection and celebration.
Reflection of what you've done, so you're celebrating and reflecting on that. It's a learning tool to me, and that is a task of the neighborhood council.
Yep. Okay. Don't forget that word, celebration, celebration.
Block parties are actually a part of that.
Yeah.
You get $200.
That's correct. We're talking
Great.
about the street.
Okay.
$800 budget.
So this isn't foreign to anybody here. You've done some of this. That's great. Okay. Well, that's the end of my piece for here, and Lynette's going to take over and talk about running effective meetings.
There's one part of this I wanted something else. One of the ways to squelch potential involvement or continual engagement is when you have the sort of persistent negative character that can happen. So we should be in the right place to address that. I mean, it is sort of a leadership issue. It's up to the leaders to stand up and say, hey, this is a group endeavor. And we're here, lots of people for different reasons, but not all just to come with the kibosh on it.
And you know, that's really about facilitation and Lynette's going to talk about that. And you know, as I look at facilitation or facilitating meetings and all that, it really is a lifelong learning process. And the issue that you bring up, Ivan, is really, really important to facilitating a group, that oftentimes within a group, there's going to be, I was facilitating an effort down the Bitterroot and had one person who thought that he was the only one there, you know, and just wanted to talk all the time, and no one else got to talk. And so there are all these facilitation tools that one can use to gently work with somebody who does that, to change that behavior, as well as to change the behavior of the person who puts the big downer on the whole group too. So
You can't pass them that shop pan.
the cattle prod, right? That hasn't been found to be extremely effective in changing the behavior. It stops it for a while, right? Okay, so Lynette's going to talk about facilitating meetings.
Hey Max, can I get your help really quick? Can I get your help? So I'm going to spend at least until about 5:02, where we'll wrap up and do evaluations, a little bit of time on what is facilitation, because as leaders, the big thing that we do is we facilitate either conversations, we facilitate meetings, we facilitate events, but we're constantly in that role of being the facilitator of the neighborhood, because that's the role of the leader. And so I want to cover some different things. It's providing leadership without taking control is what facilitation is about. It's also bringing ideas and perspectives to get a group to work together and make decisions. And so we'll talk about some of those pieces that matter. But the first thing, all of us have been to a bad meeting, right? Is there anybody who has not been to a bad meeting? Okay, so what are some of the things that make a bad meeting? Let's talk about what makes a bad meeting. Can you record for me? What are some of the things that make a bad meeting? Because knowing what makes it bad helps you be a facilitator of a better meeting. Marcia?
Not getting started on time.
Okay, not getting started on time. That happens in Missoula. I think we should start everything at 10 minutes after because of the university. That's their fault. Mike?
Getting off track of the agenda that you have.
All right, getting off track of the agenda. What else?
Too long.
It's too long. Too long of a meeting. Marcia?
One is the mentor at the meeting is to control having people make comments that are too minding
Okay, so,
in a
Good.
nice way.
right, so helping the comments stay on track and be succinct. All right, what else?
Too, being lectured to, and especially if it's something that's really specialized,
Okay,
that takes people too much to consume. Something you feel like you can't really engage in.
okay, so being lectured at isn't the best, being lectured at?
It's like speak to the level where they're at.
Yeah, but
It's also learning styles, so the lecture, and it's in your book, is one of the most ineffective ways to give information to somebody else. We'll come to that. What else makes a bad meeting?
Discomfort in the meeting area.
Discomfort, not a nice meeting environment. Yeah.
Sidebar talking.
Sidebar talking.
the what?
Sidebar talking. Sidebar talking, like when people are talking on the side. And there is something you can do as a facilitator that's very nonchalant when that happens. If Hans is talking, I just walk towards him while I'm talking to Patricia, and he'll stop because I'm really close. So that's one of the best tools with sidebar talking. It's just you're the person facilitating. You walk towards them, and like, oh crap, they're coming, and then they stop. So that's just, use yourself. Marcia?
Even if somebody's comment isn't pertinent, try a way to graciously accept it and incorporate it if you can, or just
Acknowledge all comments. Yep.
comment or something.
Just acknowledge all comments. I think that's, everybody has ideas, and you have to acknowledge all of them. Okay, so this really, basically what this says is you guys do already know what facilitation is, but we probably just haven't seen it put in a package yet. But the first thing I would like to do is do a little exercise about facilitation. And so what I need from you, what I will say really quick as a sidebar, that this training or this piece of facilitation could be a 3-day training or a 16-day course. There's a ton of information in here. So I'm giving you the basics, and there's more detail in your book. And maybe next year, if it's something you guys are interested in, we could do a whole session on it. So, just keep that in mind. But what I want to help you to begin to understand what a facilitator must do, I need you to get in teams of 3. And I need you to pick somebody who's for an issue. So one of you is going to be talking for an issue. One of you is going to be talking against an issue. And one of you is going to be the facilitator between the two people talking for and against. Okay?
Sounds more like a mediator.
Well, that's what a facilitator is. In many situations, you become that person of compromise. You're trying to get people to agree. You're trying to pull out what we can work on that's similar. That really is what a facilitator is. So, get into groups of 3, and there's sample issues. If you turn to page 30 in your book, page 30 talks about person A is for the issue, person B is against the issue, and there's a facilitator. And then below that, there's sample issues, like talking about for and against pay raises for teachers, for and against mandatory community service in high schools, for or against making cigarettes illegal, those kinds of things. So pick one of those issues and do a for and against, and the facilitator, do your best at facilitating that conversation. And then we'll talk about some of that and really look at, the pieces that are necessary to do that. But I think practicing and trying to work through that is good right now. So we have, let's do 3s here. We've got 3 here. And then Mary Lou, if you'll go with Patricia and Ivan, Mike and Roxy with Mary, Marcia, Ray, Carol, and Kathy with these 2. So I think that works out.
Wow.
Yes.
To me, you just have to bring up an efficiency. Try to figure out